Hello, everyone, and welcome to the IEP Toolkit. I'm Lisa Kirsch Satawa from Kirsch Daskas Law Group, and I hope that you didn't miss me too much last week. I did actually go on vacation. It happens every once in a while. It was really nice to enjoy northern Michigan and a little revitalized and ready to go. So we're going to focus today on, we're going to continue the toolkit. And as promised, the official IEP toolkit will be downloadable and available this week. I have one more thing I have to record, and then they're going to release it, and I think it will be super helpful for people. So just today we're gonna talk about English language learners, ELL, or English as a second language. ESL is what we used to call it in the old days when I was in school. But there's some really important distinctions between children who don't speak English at home. And even if a child speaks perfect English at school, if they're not speaking if they're not speaking English at home, they're not necessarily getting that development at the same pace as children who are speaking English at home. So this is really important. And it's important for educators and parents to be aware that English language learners can experience learning and thinking differences at the same rate as other students, as long as we keep that playing field level and that we are cognizant that some things may be a disability and that it's an issue with thought or thinking or how you're taught or how you learn or how you process. But some things just may be because they don't have the proficiency in English. So it's hard to figure out, and basically the the law says that you should figure it out first. You look to see if this is a language issue. Then you figure out if there is some sort of thought or processing or learning issue. Um, but certainly you have to look at the second language um, being the language in school and not spoken at home as a factor. And you should also know that having English as your second language or being an English language learner does not cause you to have thinking or learning differences or difficulties. It's just hard at the beginning to figure out who's on first, as they say. So when we're looking at this, again, not all children are the same. None of them are. And this is something that is not the same either. There are parents from certain cultures who will teach their children how to read and identify their letters in their native language very, very early on. And then there will be other, parents or nannies or parapros or babysitters or grandparents or whoever's taking care of the kids when they're young who will read stories or will interact or teach songs but aren't necessarily teaching letters and sight words and things like that at a young age. So it's challenging for children when they first start school. They're trying to learn English. They're not just trying to learn English, the language. They have to learn the English that their peers speak, as well as the English used in a classroom or in an academic setting. So those are additional challenges, obviously. Um, the and that's what causes a challenge for teachers is because initially when they meet your child, they're not going to know if the struggle is because of not having the English proficiency or if it is some sort of learning issue. So um, it's very easy for English language learners to get the wrong kind of help because they're not, the reasons aren't explored deep enough when the child is really young. The goal, according to the Department of Education standards is that these, the English, the native English speakers and the English language learners should all be equal by around, age 7 or 8. That is the goal. So, why do English language learners struggle in school? First and foremost, it may be health issues. It may be stress. It may be sleep deprivation. It may be culture shock. It may be poor nutrition. It may be adapting to new nutrition. It could be any amount of health issues. There's also, the ups and downs of learning a new language, and that can be really hard, and it can cause a child to struggle because they don't understand the concepts. Maybe some of the concepts are unique to English that were not uh, available or a part of their native language. A lot of time, teachers think that this can be solved by giving them a little more time and a little more attention, and that can work in some cases. I don't know if it's necessarily a little bit more attention, but certainly, the amount of attention needed to figure it out and to help those children is invaluable. So the other issue that can cause a challenge is that there's a lack of native language support. So that is, when children are only taught in English and they're not taught simultaneously in their native language. Studies show that if they're taught at the same time in their native language, that they will develop better organizational skills, better memory, better focus than kids who are fluent only in one language. Um, Statistically, you'll notice that bilingual children tend to have less ADHD diagnoses than one language children. There can be, as I said, learning or thinking differences that can cause problems with language, reading, and attention. They can't be ruled out, but you have to look at it to make sure it's not a creature of the language before you get to looking at things like dyslexia or auditory processing disorder, ADHD, um, or uh, anything on the spectrum. You want to really look at the language issue first. Um, so these children also need a lot of support learning English, as well as support in the classroom. The first step is an English proficiency test. There's 2 broad categories on the test. The test has some problems. Um, Basically, they're trying to figure out if the child has enough English to participate meaningfully in an English only classroom. That's what they're trying to figure out. 80% of students who are on the language efficiency test are native born who prove to be fluent and able to meet that standard of being able to participate meaningfully. So it's really interesting. The problem with the proficiency testing is that it is inconsistent and that proficiency labels are used differently around the country. So if the definition of proficiency is not standardized, so even in different parts of the same state, a child could be determined to be proficient where in another part of the same state they would not. The kids with the same language abilities might get help in some places in the state or in the country and not in others. So that's one problem. The other problem is that some proficiency tests only measure conversational English. We all know the conversational English is very, very different than academic English. And we don't have a test that distinguishes between academic English and spoken or conversational or slang English. So that's another challenge that these kids face. There's other problems with English instruction, and one is that it's a fast track to learning English, and there's not a lot of native language support at the same time. Sometimes it's easier to teach the concept in the native language first, according to research, and then teach it in English so that the child understands that they're the same thing. There's a push um, for kids to go in an ESL classroom and work on their English skills. So they're pulled out of the regular classroom to do this, and that can make them struggle in other areas. There's also, they deal with what's called transitional bilingual students, and that's how when they're learning their native language and English at the same time. This is usually a lot of times this starts in like upper elementary school and transitions through middle school, and then it becomes strong English at the end of middle school and through high school. There's also dual language programs or two-way bilingual or two-way immersion programs, and these help students become fully fluent in both their native language and English at the same time. These programs have the most success in helping English language learners keep up academically with their peers. So, why are English language learners misidentified? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it could be a cart and a horse problem. Where are we looking at it? Is this an English problem? Is this a learning problem? Is this a processing problem? And what are we going to look at first? And it can be very overwhelming. Um, the the most important thing is for teachers to realize if the problem is happening in both languages. Because if it is, then we are dealing with a disability. Then we are dealing with some kind of cognitive or functional issue that is going to impair education. And so we need to provide accommodations and supports and modifications to the curriculum if necessary to figure that out. This works best with the youngest children. Um, by the time a child gets to fourth grade, these issues should be identified and rectified, and there should be IEPs addressing them for most effective learning. From fourth grade on, English language learners are considered overdiagnosed with learning and thinking differences, um, and their schoolwork becomes much, much harder, and they're not being looked at that point to the extent that they should as English language learners, and instead they're being looked at from the special ed or disability category. So by law, very important here, schools must rule out, it's a must, it's not discretionary, language acquisition issues before they test for learning and thinking differences. This is critical. I'm going to say it again. Schools must rule out language acquisition issues before testing for learning and thinking differences. Various studies around the country show that this doesn't happen, and the reason it doesn't happen is because they have a lack of skilled staff, they have inaccurate testing modules, they have a lack of resources, there's not enough money, and there's, high stakes testing. Once you identify an issue, then you have an obligation to support it. So here we go, parents. So to make sure that your child's evaluation is as accurate as possible, you want to ask the following questions. Is the decision to test my child supported by firsthand observations and interventions from multiple sources? Is whatever they're seeing, is it being seen at home by the homeroom teacher, by the art teacher, by the math teacher, by the resource room teacher? It needs to be seen and recognized by more than one person. Will the test be given in my child's native language? Because again, if there is a learning difference, it should be identified and clear in the native language as well as in English. So you know if you're doing it in the native language that you are going to find it if it's there, where in English you might be getting it confused. Is the test designed for English language learners? Remember earlier we talked about how some tests, actually, we didn't talk about it. I was talking to a client about it. We did not talk about it. But some tests are when the child is, they get their percentile rank, they're being ranked against children who are also English language learners. And usually, if things are okay, they're going to end up in the mid range, and that's fine because they're being compared to other English language learners. However, on certain tests, you know, there may be, they'll fall in like the 1 percentile. And that's when they're not distinguished and there's no differentiation between English language learners and native English speakers who are taking the test. The next question is, will a well-trained ESL or bilingual professional administer the test? Because remember that if a child struggles with English and the instructions are in English, even if the test is not in English, it still could be a problem and we still could have inaccurate results. So the answer should be yes to every single one of those questions. Very, very, very important. So I want to jump over, talk a little bit about the law, how it protects you and your children. And it's really important for parents to be involved, obviously, with all special learners, but even more so when you are trying to figure out if it truly is a difference in learning or it's just a language issue. So, No Child Left Behind from 2001, and obviously the Individual with Disabilities, the Education Act, the IDEA of 2004, both provide the rights of students with learning and thinking differences. And the No Child Left Behind, or NCLB, specifically gives the rights to English language learners. There are some really good sections in, I think it's around page 14 and 15, as well as on page 90, that are some really helpful charts and good resources if you don't want to read the whole entire thing. So some of the most important rights that are in there, though, just to give you a little overview, are universal education, number one. Every student must be educated. You can't turn away a student because they don't speak English or because of their immigration status or because of their ability. Another right that everyone has is school choice. Children's schools must raise student achievement levels by a certain amount each year. If it doesn't increase for 2 years in a row, you can move your child to a school you choose in the district that will move your child to the next level. And the district will have to pay transportation costs. And then there might be other schools of choice as well that are options. Sometimes there's private schools that can provide that the district cannot provide, or there may be schools in other districts that can provide. And in some instances, the district will compensate your family for having to go outside the district to educate your child. It's important that there's translation services, and they're guaranteed by federal law, and that schools must try to translate key school documents into the native language. It won't be possible for all languages, but they should almost always translate into Spanish. And in many areas of Michigan, they almost always are translating into Arabic. There should be interpreters available that meet with school staff who don't speak the child's native language and that they understand each other. And there should never be any fear from a parent asking for an interpreter for the teacher or for the teacher to ask for an interpreter in order to effectively educate your child. You also have a right to a language support program. Schools must teach all students how to read, write, speak, and understand English. If your child scores below a certain level on the English proficiency test, then they'll be offered language support. School can choose the type of instruction. They're not required to provide bilingual education or any native language support, even though all the research, all the studies say that's what works best. So if you are the parent of an English language learner and you are moving somewhere, this may be a question you want to ask the school that you're considering sending your child to, is whether or not they do have bilingual support and if they'll be teaching the native language and English at the same time. You also should ask how long, if there's any special programming that the child is being put in, you also want to ask how long they anticipate that your child will be in that program, when they anticipate that the playing field will be level and they'll have the proficiency both in spoken English and academic English to no longer require the supports. There should also be an evaluation for special services. And, that's now like number 8 on my list. So, as I said, these are your rights. This is what's guaranteed to you by law. So, first, there's all of this English and bilingual and native language support. And then we get to an evaluation for special services if you suspect that there's a learning or thinking difference. And then there needs to be an educational evaluation. And as I mentioned earlier, if the educational evaluation can be in your child's native language, that is going to get you the most accurate results. If it's in English, depending on the proficiency, you may want to have an interpreter. You also have a right to have that there should be evidence of no language barriers. So before your child is evaluated, the school must provide proof that the child's difficulties or struggles are not due to language, are not due to English or lack of English skills. And schools must do formal testing for learning and thinking differences in the child's native language. And that is a right that you have, and you should ask for it. So, some of the different questions that parents ask me are, well, how do I get the answers to all this stuff? Well, as we know, if it's not in writing, then it didn't happen. So you're definitely going to want to request any English language proficiency or testing or interpreters, any of the things we just talked about in writing. You want to have discussions frequently with the teacher so that you're constantly evaluating if it really is the result of English not being your child's native language, or if we do need to move on to other evaluations for differences in learning. So some of the questions you can ask the teacher is, why do you think my child's struggling? What have you or others done to address the struggles? Has she responded to the extra help? How is she doing compared to her peers? How is she doing compared to her peers that are English language learners? And what can I do at home to support you and what you're doing in the classroom? And really, if you have, the answers to those 5 questions, then you'll at least be able to give your child as much exposure to education and as much access to education as you can. You should also talk to your child's doctor and maybe to a specialist for more evaluation, depending on what the answers to those questions are. So, the last thing I want to talk about today is that there are, ways that teachers can support struggling English language learners, and the way that we can make things happen, parents, is by asking. And so I just want to go through a couple of these talking points with you. More things to talk to the teacher about, more things to consider. And again, talk to your child. You find out from your child. Is math hard because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing? Or is math hard because you don't have enough time? Or is math hard because this you don't know what this number is? Or is math hard because you don't even know it's a math problem? Or you don't understand the directions? So having these conversations in your native language with your child are also going to be very insightful. But basically, if these are ways the teachers can support struggling English language learners when there is not special education services or accommodations. First is they should have meetings with parents and caregivers, learn about concerns, share their concerns, and and look at them despite the limitations of time and language. They should support the student's use of the native language, even if the teachers don't speak it. They should support the cultural background of the student in the classroom. They should recognize the student's strengths as well as their weaknesses and coordinate efforts with other school professionals, such as social workers, school psychologists, the English as a second language teacher, and everyone should be on the same page. Um, Parents, it's crucial for you from the time your child is very little, even when they're learning English, to continue to speak and read to your child in your native language. You're not confusing them. As a matter of fact, if they can read, write, and speak in their native language, it's going to be much easier for them to be able to do those skills in English. And don't let language barriers stand in the way. Get interpreters for school meetings. Ask a friend who speaks both to come with you. Reach out to a community group. Talk to other parents. So, really, it's critically important to understand the role that English language learners, uh, uh, the challenges that English language learners face just by the mere fact that they're learning English. And then, when that is rolled out, then we look at whether or not they are thinking or processing or learning differently. And then we would go into a 504, an IEP. And so, with that, I'm going to stop for today. And again, I missed all of you last week while I was on vacation, but we will be back tomorrow to talk more about this, and I will give you a little sneak preview because it's really coming. This is a draft, so it's in black and white, but oh, I can't reach it. My arms aren't long enough. This is a draft, so it's in black and white, but this is it. The IEP Toolkit, Plan, Prepare, and Advocate. And um, it will be available very soon. So I thank you again, all of you, for tuning in. Reach out if you have any questions or need additional information. Lisa Kirsch Satawa, Kirsch Daskas Law Group, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, best day you can. Bye.